carving. I guess I'll maybe wait a little bit before I start so that a couple of people can jump on and check things out. But yeah, basically, I want to do a few things. I just rehandled this really lovely hook knife from my friend Miguel over at Belzebu Crafts. It's a really nice, soft radius. It's actually, as far as I understand it, it is the same radius. So this is my oldest and dearest friend. This is my hook knife, big Tukakam. And the fur, which is F-E-R, the name of this hook, is a little portion of that radius. So it's kind of like a smaller, maybe a little bit more concise piece of radius than this big guy. And so I just rehandled this one so that it's kind of in that middle ground of a single hand. You can hold it right at the back and get some more leverage. And then that way you can kind of pack it a little bit easier than this broomstick of a hook knife. But yeah, so I'm going to be trying this one out and seeing how it feels. I used a spoke shave to get a knife finish on the handle. This is oak. This is also oak. They were from the same piece of scrap that I actually brought from Vancouver because I'm in the Blue Mountains up in Sydney now. But yeah, I'll be testing this one out. I think it's going to be really nice. Miguel makes really wonderful tools, so I have no doubt that it's going to be great. But yeah, I'm just going to be carving out this big old silky oak cooking spoon. And feel free to ask me any questions that you have while I'm here and just kind of hanging out. I'm just basically just going to chip away and you guys can fire off some questions, or you can just hang out and watch me carve. I will probably just rattle on and say a few things here and there as I go if I think of it, but if you have specific questions, please let me know. I would love to, let me just get that out of the way. I'd love to make sure that I'm, giving you the information that you need. And thank you for being here, by the way. So I'm just going to pick out a couple of things, because I'm in my workshop now. It's a little bit hot outside. I have my spread of tools, and it's kind of a bit of a dealer's choice. I tend to reach for my matte white all the time. It tends to be the first go, and this has already been lined out pretty nicely with the draw knife, so I don't need to do too much refining of the edges. I'm just going to go around this top section and just give myself a little bit more of a defined line. And what I might do while I'm here is I might get this to a little bit more of a concise spot, and then I might redraw the design, but honestly I think all I need to do is just tighten up that little handle section. It doesn't require too much. This is kind of at the point of a spoon where you start really just bringing down your design and just tightening up a few little extra bits. And like I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm going to be doing a full video on this cut specifically. It's called a pull cut. And I do have people get quite nervous, uppity. They certainly have an opinion on cutting towards yourself, which is good. Don't let me don't get me wrong. Cutting towards yourself, if you are not doing it appropriately, can be really, really dangerous, because obviously you have something very sharp facing your body, which is not ideal if you're not following the proper techniques. But seeing as though I'm talking about it right now, I may as well just cover some of the basics. So when you're doing this pull cut, the key is you want to make sure that your elbows are your anchors. When I do start to pull, this elbow does move a bit, But to be honest, my knife hand is not really doing much. I cover a lot of this in the most recent video that I've just posted, where I talk about grip positions and all of that kind of stuff. But the synopsis of that is essentially you want your grip elbow pinned, because if the spoon happens to fall or slip, your body tenses, right? Your body wants to cram closed, even if you freeze. And the idea, the hope, and the intention is that if your technique's right, if this slips, your whole body tightens up, and the knife is kind of staying exactly where it stopped. That's the idea. And so I keep myself really, really tight as I do this. No big sweeping motions. You're really keeping everything as close as possible. And I'm doing a lot of my force generation from my grip hand. So like I mentioned in the video, you want your knife hand to be your rudder. You want it to just kind of be steering the cut. And I use this cut for so much of my carving. So much. It would arguably one of my most used grips. So I'm just going to bring the handle right in, and then once I've got the handle to where I'm pretty happy, I might actually hollow out the bowl. And for the main bulk of it, I'll use my large knife, and then I'll switch over to that smaller hook from Miguel. If you're ever wondering about my tools, oh hello! If you're ever wondering about my tool selections, I do have a pretty extensive look at all of my tools. I have a video, and then anything that I use in any of my videos, including this one, I make sure that I add it in the description. So if you suddenly see something that piques your eye, piques your interest, definitely check the description first, because it should all be there for you. And I do have I just posted last week an FAQ video where I kind of cover a lot of the questions that people often have when they're starting. All great questions. There's no such thing as a bad question. So if you have any, definitely feel free to ask, because I think what I'm trying to do on this page is make spoon carving really, really accessible and understandable, because I feel like some people, when they first start thinking about sharp tools or swinging an axe for the first time, it can seem quite intimidating. And I've been working with my hands for 20 years, basically, and I grew up on acreage, and I was, working with hand tools when I was a little kid. So it's a little bit less confronting for me, but I can totally appreciate if it's something that you're starting when you're, a little older, or wanting to try it as a hobby. The idea of picking up an axe for the first time can be a pretty confronting thing. It's a big, sharp thing that you're swinging a lot more consistently than you otherwise would in, when you're going camping, or even if you're splitting firewood. It's kind of one big swing and then that's it. Whereas with carving, you're really settling in and swinging it for quite a long time. So I want this channel to be a space for you to be able to ask questions that you might feel a bit, intimidated about asking, or all of that kind of stuff. I just want to make sure that I'm offering a space for people to learn a little bit more, and be okay with making mistakes, because I sure do. should post more of those mistakes now that I think about it. But it's all about respecting the process. You know, for example, this is a cut that some people can find quite scary because you're cutting kind of close to the pad of your hand. But as long as you're relying on the wood, so I think you'll be able to see that, as I'm cutting towards myself, I'm basically just pivoting. So again, there's no pull. I'm never pulling towards myself in a reckless way. It's always either rotating my wrist or squeezing this hand. Those are two big things to keep in mind. This isn't like campfire whittling where you'll see somebody kind of really pushing away, or you see somebody on a work site sharpening a pencil and they're really, you know, grabbing the knife and flying away from themselves. None of that is what I recommend doing with carving. It's all meant to be very methodical, controlled, patient cuts, and cuts that even if they are dynamic, there's kind of an end point to them. So when you're cutting like this, it'll stop right here. If there's no spoon in my hand, that's as far as it can go. I'm not following through and dragging my elbow back. I'm kind of harping on this right now, but I just want to really hammer home the fact. So even here, when I'm doing this, it's literally just moving from that part of my arm, and my elbow's not moving. I'm not bringing it up or down, because then that obviously brings the knife towards yourself. If you move your elbow as far back as you can, and then turn the knife as far back as you can, it's still this far away from my body. It can't actually get to me. So these long pull cuts, even though it looks like I'm moving the knife towards my body, it's stopping at that spot where it is really a safe distance. I hope that illuminates something for you. Just working through. Really, all I'm doing as I get to this point is just working my way around this way, and then along that plane, and then along that plane, and you just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, finding little spots that might look a little, you know, inconsistent or waving around, and it's all about just, you know, going for as long as you are comfortable. Just kind of pursuing that space right up until you can hang your hat on it and say, yeah, that's good enough for me. And some people really take that to the nth degree. I would say I fall right in the middle, where at the end of the day, I'm carving spoons. I know I'm carving spoons, so I'm not trying to make it absolutely perfect, but because this is a handcraft, and because I am a little bit meticulous, I want to be able to be happy with everything that I finish, everything that I post in my shop. I want to know that it's at a point where if someone picks it up, they're proud to own it. They're happy to have that in their kitchen. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about these lines. I'll tighten everything up once I get into the final cuts, which we're getting really close to. Another thing I like to look at is straight down the middle. So you'll see that looks pretty good. That's pretty parallel. This side is just a little low right there. So I'm just going to bring down the handle all the way on this side. And then as a result, it's a little high on the diagonal side, so bring that down just a little bit. And these are things that you kind of don't really think about until, you know, you're holding a spoon for a really long time, because it might not seem like a big deal. But let's just say this is your favorite cooking spoon. If you're holding it all day and there's just a little twist in the handle, you'll either really love that twist and it'll become a part of your, you know, like the idiosyncrasy of the handle, or it'll drive you crazy. And personally, if I'm selling these to people, I don't want them to have to play with the idea of something, you know, kind of having a little extra character if it's uncomfortable. I don't want things to be uncomfortable. I definitely lean towards function first, and then everything else follows. I always want the handle to feel nice and, you know, not necessarily rounded if there are facets. I want them to sit evenly. You know, I think people in the knife community call that hot spots in the handle. You don't want anything to kind of be digging in, or especially up near the back end, because that's where you're really digging in for a stir, you know. So I want to make sure that top section there has a little bit of curve to it. Oh, new here. Do you make specific things or all things? Specific things or all things? Well, my name is Andy Spoons, so I think it would be safe to say that my specific things are spoons, kitchen utensils, spatulas, eating spoons. But I also, you know, because it's carving, I also make, you know, axe blocks. So those are basically the workspace that you use for carving with a carving axe. I also make things like stools, and my plan is to start getting into some slightly larger work with time. But to be honest, I really do enjoy carving spoons. But it's a pleasure to have you here, so thank you. Okay, so we're getting pretty good. That's the outside profile, and that's starting to look pretty good. I think I might bring down the top side. You can kind of see it gets a little chunky right there, and so I'm just going to bring that down right now. But it's a very good question, because I do get people, you know, checking things out and saying, why spoons? And you know what? The big thing about it is, if you think of every single kitchen in the world, whether it's a multi-million-dollar mansion or a very humble house in the middle of nowhere, chances are they all have a wooden spoon in them. And there's a connection to that wooden spoon. You know, when you bring it up at a market, if I'm at a market and people say, you know, why would you do that? And then you talk about a wooden spoon in the house, and they go, oh yeah, you know, my grandma used to cook with a wooden spoon, or I've had the same wooden spoon from my mom, or I remember that old wooden spoon. You know, some people have questionable memories about wooden spoons. But it's this universal thing, you know? I find it really interesting to be able, in the same way that a chef is creating something that's really personal, you're consuming what they make. For me, I'm creating something that becomes a part of your home. It becomes a part of your workflow. You know, if you're cooking and you reach for a cooking spoon that I've made, that's, you know, that's an important moment in your day. Can you talk through best practices of what to use for spoon finishes? Yes. Okay, absolutely. So and not to turn this into at all a sponsored post or anything like that, though, you know, full disclosure, I do get products sent to me from Real Milk Paint Co., based out of Tennessee. Tennessee? Oh no, I'm not sure. I'll have to double check that. I can check that. But anyway, they have sent me a lot of products, and I, over the years, have used a lot of different products as well. I've tried a lot of different companies. I really like this wood wax that they offer. It's walnut and carnauba wax. I've tried a ton of different finishes and waxes. I've tried, you know, roll-in seed oil, tongue oil, walnut oil, a lot of different nut oils. I really like the way that that finishes. I like the way that it seals the wood. It's a hardening, polymerizing finish. Anyway, I'm going to switch to the large knife now. I really highly recommend that wood wax. I only use it because I enjoy it. They did send it to me, you know, full disclosure, but if I don't like something, I'm not going to use it because I'm putting it on something that I'm selling to people, and I want to make sure that it lasts for a long time. So I've put it on all of my own spoons as well, just to, you know, kind of pressure test everything before it made it out the door. And all of my spoons, you know, I eat with a wooden eating spoon every day. I cook with wooden spoons every day. All of them are coated with that wood wax. I swear by it. It's really good. It's really good. You can use raw linseed oil. Absolutely. Don't use boiled because there's a lot of nasty chemicals in that. The one thing about linseed oil personally is I don't really like the smell or the taste. It kind of leaves a little bit of a something, which personally I'm not a big fan of. But if you're okay with that, that's totally fine as well. And then, you know, this is in my, I kind of add this into my FAQ video that I posted, but I do say things like avoiding just using olive oil or coconut oil, because you can touch your spoons up with that and that's fine. But if you want something to harden, olive oil and coconut oil won't harden. So once you hit them with some heat, they will basically just dissipate off the wood. And so it's kind of I don't want to say waste of time, because it's great to have some kind of coating, and you know, some of it will seep into the grain. But if you want to actually seal your spoons, you need to find something that truly polymerizes. Tung oil is a really good one. It just takes a long time. I have used tung oil in the past, and it's really magic stuff. But you have to wait like a month for especially pure tung oil. You know, if you have something with some citrus blend to kind of speed it up, it can be, you know, 2 weeks. But that's still 2 weeks. And for me, often I'll finish a spoon, and within that 2-day period, I'll post it in the site, andyspoons.com, for anyone who feels like checking it out. But I'll often post things in the site and they'll be sold quite quickly, and so I'll have to send them off quite quickly. So I want to make sure that everything that I'm coating is pretty much ready to use within the week, or even a couple of days. And like I say, I've put oil on my own spoons and used them that same day to see how it works. It's fine. A day's a little tight. A couple of days is pretty good. I made a spoon. We're going to sell, so you can sell it. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've made a bunch of spoons. So with my business model, I make everything and then post it straight away onto the shop. I don't tend to do custom orders or commissions, mainly because people seem to like what I put up, and I really love that, and that means a lot to me. And if you're doing commissions, I think usually that means that somebody has a really specific idea in mind, and I find that difficult to meet, to be honest, because I do what I do and that's it. Not to be, you know, not to make it sound stubborn or matter of fact, but just from a stress point of view, I like to make sure that what I'm carving is really genuine. And if somebody asks me for something really, really specific, I feel like I struggle to make it as genuine as possible. But I have definitely carved spoons and then gotten to the end of it and gone, that's pretty nice. I think I might, I think I might not post that one in the shop. You know, sometimes things just go really right, and you know, I also carve things that are slightly unorthodox, and then I'll want to try them out for myself to see if that even works. Something like a bunch of facets on the bottom of the eating spoons. I don't know if I have any on hand here, but something like you can see here, there's there's a lot of like flat spots all over the back of this yogurt spoon. This is a really nice long yogurt spoon, or you could use it as like an extra large teaspoon. But sometimes if I do facets that are a little bit different, I like to make sure that it actually feels good and it works. So I might use one for a little while and it'll live with me, and then I'll make another one with that same design if it feels good. So anyway, we're getting pretty close. I've just been chatting and roughing that out. I think I'm going to use the different hook now that I've done all the roughing, and we'll see how it feels. I've got high hopes. I just did some sharpening with it as well. For anyone asking, I have videos on this as well, so please go and check them out. I use a piece of dowel that's got some stropping compound, some Veritas green compound on it, and then this is high grit sandpaper. That's it. That's my sharpening process for hook knives. And I literally just wrap this around the dowel, and there's all of my processes in another video. But that's the extent of it. I am planning on getting in contact with someone in the mountains for some high quality kangaroo leather to make another strop, but it's a pretty straightforward thing. I don't put too much into this. Oh, so this is feeling really nice. Cutting very softly, which is really nice, because I might end up turning this into my kind of bug out bag carving knife if I'm going to a market and I don't want to bring all of my really special stuff. Not to say that this isn't special, but I feel like this is a really versatile curve as well, and it's a bit longer, so I could just bring this and just bring a knife, and I would be really happy to carve with just those two things. Oh yeah, this is feeling great. I also made this handle a little thinner so that when I'm gripping, I can grip right up on my fingers, and long enough so that I can do things like this. And so far, so good. I tend to sharpen my hook knives up to 10,000 grit. You can get high grit sandpaper. I think the automotive industry is where your best bet is to find it. I think a lot of car detailers use the high grit stuff. So you can jump on the internet and just basically look for high grit sandpaper. There's often packages of 600 to 10,000, or somewhere in that area, 800 to 7,000. If you're just getting started, starting around the 600 mark to be able to put an edge on really quickly, and then I think you don't need to go much further past. Honestly, you don't need to go much further past 2,000. Everything past that is basically increasing your knife finish. So it just, the rule of thumb is the more polished the blade, the more polished the wood. So if you want to get a really nice shiny finish, you can keep going all the way up. And I think there's Shapton glass stones that go to 40,000 grit or something like that. But I think once you're at that area, you could just be stropping, and really once you start carving wood, the first few passes bring that edge back down pretty quickly. So you can save those really fine edges for your finishing cuts where you're taking really little amounts. But anyway, we're closing in on a finished spoon bowl there. I'll just do a little bit here. Yeah, there we go. So that center section I'm pretty happy with being done. You can kind of see it's got a pretty nice soft finish. It's glassy and polished. I'm happy with that, especially for a cooking spoon. you know, you could sit there and fuss over it for another hour if you wanted to, which I might if I was making an eating spoon, because it's amazing how quickly you can feel things if you're, you know, if you put an eating spoon in your mouth, your lip really picks up on those little bumps and lumps. But you know, the most you're going to be using out of this is sipping from the corner, so it doesn't really matter if there's a bit of inconsistency in the bowl, which, to be honest, this one's looking pretty good, so I'm not worried about that. So that is pretty good. I'll probably do the final edge with a slide knife. And then now that I've got that all set up, what I'll do is I'll get the slide knife back, the straight knife, some people call it, and just kind of do a little bit of edge refining. And what I might do is I think I'm going to make a faceted back of the bowl, which is a really fun like extra detail that some people really like. So let's do that. Let's do that right now. So what I use is a little tip for you. I'm left-handed, so my hooks are left-handed, which means when you're cutting, the edge is facing towards you. That's kind of the general rule of thumb. But for the facets, I use a right-handed hook. This is just a little hook made by Matt White at Temple Mountain Woodcraft. Really beautiful tools. And the reason that I use a right-handed hook is because it gives me the ability to push. I put my thumb on the back, like, let's see if you can see what I mean. My thumb on the back, and I push, and then that way I basically make sure that all of the cuts are uniform. I'll actually bring the camera down just a little bit so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. So what I do when I'm faceting the back is I pick close to the middle of the bowl as I can, right at the back of the shoulder, and I take one first cut. And you can see, I think, there's just, yeah, see that one dimple? And that's my center line, I guess you would call it. So I make sure that that's nice and cleaned up and looks as centered as it can be. It's pretty good. And then once I've got my center facet, or divot, I guess you could call it, you know, it's a golf ball at this point. Just a second. There we go. I work on either side out from that section, so, and I try and do it in one go. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That one's a little long. This one's a little deep. Okay, so you can see I've started to do a run of facets there. That one's a little long, but I can even that out in a moment. And then what I do is I pick the middle point and work in between them, like a beehive. Like you honeycomb that section. So I go just, you know, in between 1 and 2, make one cut. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that that cut basically bridges the gap. You don't want any space in between that. And the trick is joining that one and the next one up in the middle, if that makes sense. So I'll show you once I get that cut in. There we go. So you can see there that you've got 1, 2, 3. I hope you can see that. It's a little tricky with this lighting. Yeah, you can see 1, 2, 3, and there's no gap in between them, so they're all lined up like that. And then I'll just kind of move on through, and you want to just make that cut in single motions so that it looks like a nice single facet. and then you just do the whole bowl. Trying to keep things as even as you can. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there we go. So that's how you do the faceted back of the bowl. I hope that gives you a cool idea of how to do that. And then sometimes what I'll do as well is I'll check my angle, and then I might use the hook to take out these bits as well to really curve that through, just to make it look a little bit more dynamic. All the way. And then this gives it that nice curve, which again, because this is a cooking spoon, it doesn't need to be perfect for the back, and especially with these giant facets, I wouldn't do something this angular for your mouth. Where are you from? I'm currently based in the Blue Mountains in Australia. Yeah, that's where I'm from. Cool. Okay, so that's my big kind of aggressive back of the faceting of the bowl. So now that that's done, and it's a quick process. You just need to, when you first do it, take your time, because it can be frustrating if you try and rush it like I didn't rush it just then because I've done this hundreds of times. But if you try and rush it in the speed that I just did it, and you make a mistake, you can go through the bowl pretty quickly. So that's why I left a big bit of chunk on the back before I did that, so that I knew that I could bring the top down to it. Because if you try and cut back up, you're playing with fire a little bit. You're hoping that you've got precision perfect depth, which I sure don't. So I like to give myself a little bit of a contingency, a bit of a backup. Okay, so this is starting to come together really nicely. We're almost done. Almost done. And because I've got some nice big facets on the back, what I might do is just add a little detail on the shoulder, just a little kind of wedge point. Hello from New Zealand. Hello! Thank you for being here. I was in New Zealand for 24 hours a month ago. I was in Auckland. Another part of my life is I was a touring guitar tech for a little while, and that was the first time I'd been to New Zealand, which is crazy because it's so close and it's so beautiful, and I really want to go back there as soon as I can. Okay, so I'm just basically making everything nice and round, softening all my edges, and then what I'll do and this is usually done a lot faster than this, but because we're just kind of hanging out, I'm not burning through it. I'm just taking my time and making sure that everything's easy to follow along. But we're on the home stretch, really. At this point, my shape is defined. The handle is a pretty nice size. It's a little oversized, but it's a cooking spoon, so I don't mind that. I don't mind if it's a little oversized. You want to be able to reach for it without looking and grab it out of your mason jar and get going, right? So I'm feeling pretty good about this. Now what I'll do at this point is just make sure that the bowl looks nice and symmetrical, or, you know, balanced, I think is probably the better way to describe it, because I do everything freehand. So as you can see, it's got a little bit of a drop down there, but I actually quite like that. If you happen to be, you know, aiming for the corner of the bowl, it's nice to have a slightly raised section so that it kind of, you know, bites into that corner. In the same reason that I leave the front quite chunky on cooking spoons, because, you know, when you're stirring a whole bunch of stuff in a pot, you want to be able to do that with confidence and really get in there. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. This is a nice spoon. And like I mentioned, the way that I work is that I finish carving these, I leave them for a day or two, and then put them straight up in andyspoons.com. So if you like what you see, please jump over to the site. I also have these shirts for sale. This is me. This is my design from a really wonderful designer in Sydney called Cindy Sin. He's fantastic. I had him drum up. Basically, this isn't, you know, these aren't, what's the word, photoreal. This is basically just a crazy design of the axe that I use. As you can see, there's a few of them behind me right there. But if you want to pick one up, you can, from andyspoons.com. Okay, basically just running around all of the edges, because what I've learned is really sharp edges chip. So it's good to make sure that you've just chamfered all of the sharp edges. You still want to keep, you know, things angular, but you don't want sharp edges, because that's where it can catch and just kind of chip out, and so that's not nice. I'm trying to get rid of all of that stuff. And then just blending some lines together to make sure that everything feels uniform. That's feeling pretty good, actually. Just adjusting this angle just a bit. That's pretty nice. Starting to get there. And then I will just do the inside of the bowl, and we're pretty much done. It's pretty much a start to finish finishing cuts. I will definitely try and do more of this style of live stream. Please feel free to ask questions while I'm doing this, because, you know, I'm just hanging out here carving, and so it would be really great, you know, to have some, if you've got things that you're curious about, if you just want to know what the heck I'm doing here, that's a valid question too. Sometimes I ask myself that as well. I'm sure we all do. So right now I'm just using a very small detail knife to do just the finishing kind of inside chamfer of the bowl, to make sure that, again, there's no hard edges in there. Also, with a cooking spoon, if you have really hard edges, that's where food can catch, and, you know, it's not a great look. So you don't want too many hard edges. So just working around this and softening it all up just a bit. Making sure there's no lifted grain or anything like that. One thing I've noticed is a little bit of kind of inconsistency on this top section, so I might try and just carve that out really quickly with the hook knife. Just give it a bit more of a refined, you can see that, oh sorry, there we go. Just give it a bit more of a refined lip. that up. Cool. Really close, really close. I'll just do some final cuts and that'll be that. So just flattening this section out. And you can do this part for hours. This is where you can really get into the weeds. And every tiny little chamfer can drive you crazy. So I try and, it's a good lesson in letting go when you get to this point, because you want to make sure that you're not getting too bogged down, because at the end of the day, like I said before, it's a spoon. It's a spoon, so you can't get too overexcited about everything being perfect, because ideally people grab it. This is what I always say to people. Sometimes I'll have someone say, "Oh, it looks, you know, it's a really nice thing. I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to hang it on my wall or something like that." Don't do that. They're built to be used. The biggest compliment that I can ever have if I go somewhere where I've sold a spoon to someone, or they happen to be living at someone's home, is to see that they've been thoroughly used. That makes me really, really happy, because I designed them to be put up with some duress. So when you buy one of my spoons, please use it. And that's why I do this. Alright, just making sure that this end is, again, rounded off, but that is pretty good. I think I will consider that a spoon. Nice big chunky cooking spoon with some faceting along the back that I think is really nice. Just adds a bit of extra appeal. But yeah, I hope that has given you some information on how to carve. Check out the Andy Spoons site, and yeah, I'm gonna head off now. But thank you so much for hanging out with me. Really means a lot, and I will see you all again very soon. All the best.